Okay, Tov. Today's daf is daf Kuf Dalid and Bamis learn Parchen of Kol Beis Yisrael and Sunnah Matzar Shivya. We're up to about the fifth line down on Kuf Dalid and Raf. We left up yesterday. Misha just said that if you had leased a field from somebody and it was a irrigation field, a field that required irrigation, or it was a field that had trees, and then the irrigation dried up, or the tree wasn't there anymore, are you still not allowed to deduct from the rental? In other words, you can't say I want to pay less now because it doesn't have the irrigation, I have more work to do. However, it specifically lease me this irrigation field or this tree field that has trees on it, then he can deduct. Okay. Now we said also that the first two mishnayos of this parak, including the one we just mentioned, you can work those out in cases either of where you're renting it, leasing it for a percentage on a percentage basis, or if you're paying a fixed fee, that's called a chakira or a regular lease. Okay, so now the Gemara is going to deal with what's this business about. If you mentioned the irrigation field, if you didn't mention the irrigation field, what's going on? Why can't he say, well, simply that's the name of the field? It's called the irrigation field, but it's not that you're renting the field because it has irrigation, and if the irrigation disappears, that you're entitled to deduct. Why are you entitled to deduct? He said if he rented a field and it happens to be an irrigation field that happens to have trees on it, and then the irrigation stopped or the tree was gone, you can't claim a deduction from the rental. But if you said specifically, I'm renting the irrigation field or the tree field, then if those things are missing, you could make a deduction. But why? Just because they're called that, that's the name of the field. It's called the irrigation field. It's called the tree field. But it's not dafka because it has irrigation. Milotan, did we not learn in similar cases? I'm selling you a base core, an amount of a field. Base core, I'm selling you a dirt field that has got a base core in it. Even though it's only got half that amount, doesn't have a base core lesach. A core is 30 saw. A lesach is half that amount. Too bad. Even though it's called that, it's called by that name. It's called base core. As long as it's called the base core, it's called the base core, even if it's only half that amount there, because it's called by that name. So here too, maybe it's called the irrigation field, but it doesn't mean that it has to have irrigation, or otherwise the lessee can deduct. Similarly, I'm selling you this vineyard. Even though there's no vines in it, too bad. Okay, it's called the vineyard over there. As long as it's called the vineyard, even if there's no vines in it, that's the deal. Similarly, I'm selling you an orchard. Even though it has no pomegranates or other things that grow in an orchard, there's nothing in it. Tough. That's the deal. Sold my name. As long as it's called a pardes, it's a pardes, even if there's no fruits in there. It's called a karam, even though there's no karam. If it's called the karam, I'm selling you the karam. You could tell him, listen, just selling you that name. He could tell him, I just told you the name of the field. The name of the field, it's called irrigation field. Doesn't mean it has to have irrigation. Here too, you could say, I just told you the name. Amar Shmuel. The Shmuel says, our case in a Mishnah is different than those cases that you just mentioned with the base core, the karam, and the pardes. Why? When the machkir, the seller, the lessor, tells the lessee, I'm selling you this field, whatever, this karam, whatever, you're right. Then you could just say it's the name itself. But if he just said, if the lessor told the lessee, I'm selling you this vineyard, this field, this irrigation field, whatever, is just called by that name. That's all he told him. But if the lessee is more particular, he says, listen, he tells the lessor, listen, I want to buy this irrigation field. He wants a field that has irrigation in it. And if it has no irrigation, if it's dried up, then he's entitled to deduct. Then kapeda, then he's particular, then he's makbid about it. He doesn't want it otherwise. So in our Mishnah, if you look at the words of Mishnah, 4 lines from the bottom of the base on yesterday's daf, Imam he told him, Chakorli Sada Beis Hashlachan, lease me this field, this irrigation field, or Osad the base or this field that has trees in it, then he's makbid. So that's the difference. The difference is it the lessor saying it, I'm selling you this, and that's the name of it. Not that he was makbid. But if the lessee says, sell me this irrigation field, that means he's particular about it, and if there is no irrigation, he can deduct. Ravina Amar, no, in both cases, it's speaking with the lessor told the lessee. Why? But Midikomer Zeh, what did he tell him? He said, sell me this particular field. And he said, Chakorli saw the basis of Zu, or saw the basis of Ilan Zeh. Since he said this one, Mechlal the Korbuk must be that he's standing in it. He said, this one, I'm selling you, I'm renting you or leasing you this field. All right, I told him this one. What do you mean this one? Where are you? What did he? If you're in a lawyer's office, you don't say this one. You specify with the gush and the chalka. When he said this one, it's because he's standing there. Machlal the koibig basket, he's standing in it. The koibig. So why did he have to say beis shlach lamali? Why did he have to say? In both cases, it could be with the lessor said it. But even if the lessor said the word beis shlach, why did he have to say that? He said, "I'm renting you, I'm leasing you this field." So obviously we know which field it is. Why did he then go and detail and say that it's beis shlach lamali? Lamali lememer. The kamal beis shlach. Why he's standing in the field. The koibig abah. So beis shlach lamali lememer. The kamal beis shlach. Get a come in to tell him, I'm selling you this field the way it is now, where it has irrigation in it, and therefore if it dried up, or I'm leasing you this field that has irrigation in it, and if it dried up, you're entitled to deduct for that. So that's the pshat of our Mishnah. But again, those two Mishnayos, the first two Mishnayos can be speaking about either where he took it as a sharecropper, where he leased it and he paid him a percentage, as we said, like Tosas points out over here when we said yesterday's daf, and the first Mishnah, where he said just like they split the straw and the stubble, they also split the wine, and just like they split the wine, they split all the sticks that they use to hold up the vines and the branches, etc. They split everything. Well, you split everything. You're talking about where you're doing it based on a percentage, but it could also work with a lease. If the minig is in terms of if the minig, as we said, to cut it down, you cut it down. To uproot it, you can't change the minig. That works either for a straight out lease where you're paying a fixed amount, either a fixed amount of produce, grain, or a fixed amount of money. That would be a chakira, or if it works as a sharecropper, where you're a kablan and you're getting it with kablanut as a sharecropper, you're taking a certain percentage, whatever that percentage is agreed upon. The rest of the Mishnayos in this parak, as we'll see now, work only in one way or another. Either it's a lease or it's a percentage. It doesn't work. The Mishnah doesn't work both ways. The first two Mishnayos you could interpret in both ways. Sometimes it works to work as a kablan, as a percentage, or it could work as a straight lease. The next Mishnayos don't work that way, as we'll see. You leased a field from somebody else, Bovira, and you neglected it. You let it go fallow. You didn't work it. Shamanosa, so you estimate it, you assess it. Kamarui lasses. Had you worked it properly, how much would it have produced? And that's what he has to give. That's what the sharecropper, in this case, the lessee, who's a sharecropper, would have to give to the lessor. How much you have to pay the balabaya? Because he caused him a loss. He didn't work the field. Why? Shakach kosef. Why? How do you know that he has to do it? I mean, he could have said, listen, I rented the field. I was going to sleep there. Shakach kosef, because he wrote him, im over, below avid, if I let it go fallow and I don't work it below avid, I will pay out of the best to make it up to you. This is clearly a case of sharecropper, not a case of a lessee who's paying a fixed amount of rent, because if he's paying a fixed amount of rent, then it doesn't make any difference. He has no excuse. You're paying whatever it is, $1,000 a month for this field. If you don't produce anything, it's your tough luck. You still have to pay $1,000. So this Mishnah, when he says you assess it. What's the point of an assessment? The point of assessment is to say what you have to pay the owner, because it's based on percentage. If you took it, let's say you're going to be 50-50 and you produce nothing, so they assess how much would it have produced if you would have worked it in the normal manner, and then half of that amount you owe to the owner. So this is talking about a case of a sharecropper only, not the case of a lessee, because then it wouldn't apply. We'll see.
This is the first time you have a written contract.
Yeah. So interesting, because that's a segue into what the Gemara is going to talk about. The Gemara is going to say, right. You could always write. We've had many times with contracts, and we understood that, but we're specifically right where he specifically told him that not. So he told him, But interesting because he said, if I don't work the land, I'm going to pay you. Don't worry, I'm going to pay you. You could argue and say, I'm taking this field as a sharecropper, I'll pay you 50%. But he didn't say what 50% of nothing is nothing, right? But here he told him, I let it go fail, I'll pay you the best. Now we're going to bring down this case and then other similar cases. Rav Meir, who was presumably the author of our Mishnah, he would expound what normal common people put in their contracts, even though that wasn't sanctioned by the rabbis. The rabbis didn't say you have to put it in the contract. Nowhere do we have until now, if you didn't write in the contract, the whole deal is off. No, you could have a deal even with no contract, right? But here, Rav Meir, take a look at Rashi, the first Rashi in the Gemara after the Mishnah. Regular commoners, it was common for them to write these words. It wasn't a decree of the rabbis. But he said, you know what? This is what people do, and we're going to talk a paskin that way. The way people write in their shtar, we're going to take it literally. To say, that's the halacha. And that's really what Meir said in our Mishnah. The time Rav Meir said, if you use that lashon, you become a sharecropper on this field. I'm taking this field from you for the season, let's say for a year. And if I let it go, if I neglect it, I don't work the land. I let it go fail below Evid. I'm going to pay you the best. And Rav Meir said, okay, what kind of lashon said? Rav Meir used that lashon, and Rav Meir over below Hashem. The rabbis didn't coin that phrase. It's like the rabbis wrote, the rabbis had a special lashon, but you write in a get. You have the 12 lines, and you have the Tofis and the Torah and all that. Here, this was just a commonly accepted custom that they wrote this, and then you know what? A sharecropper says, if I let it go bad, I'm going to pay you anyway the full value of what it would have produced. Pay you the best. And Rav Meir actually put that in our Mishnah. I'm a kabel son of mechaber. You let it go bad, you have to pay the full. Why? Because that's the minig. The minig is to write. In other words, this price is explaining that when Rav Meir said this halacha in our Mishnah, where he got it from. He got it from the common people. Now, the rest of today's daf is going to deal with other similar cases where rabbis based the halacha on the common practice. Rabbi Yehuda Hayadorish Lashon had the following way. He took the common language of people. He's the time of Rabbi Yehuda Amar, Adamevi Karban Ashar Lishto. A man, there are certain karbanos that if you're wealthy, you bring a regular animal. If you're poor, you bring birds. And if you're really poor, you bring a flower offering, a mincha. Okay. What about a woman who has to bring? She has to bring karbanos after she gives birth. If she was a zava, a full zava, she has to bring karbanos. Or if she committed a sin, she's chayiv an ashim or achatas. In cases where there's no leviore, you can always say, listen, masha kana ishto, kana bala, right? She has no possessions. Her husband owns everything. So you can always claim, well, she's poor. So he says, no, Adam maybe carbon usher, she's got to bring, even though technically she is poor, but because everything belongs to her husband, still a person must bring, if he has the means, even for his wife's obligations. Rashi points out it's not if she made a net or a dava, not if she made a free will gift to the base of Mikdash, but things that she's obligated for, a chatas or an asham, or a korban that she has to bring after she gave birth, that the Torah requires that, or after she was a zava, right? So automatically korban, he has to bring those requirements that she has to bring. If he's wealthy, he has to give her the value of an expensive animal. In other words, he's got to give full value. You can't claim that she's poverty. And any carbon that she's chayav, he has to bring for a carbon, not only carbon ishta, let's say zava, but a zava or a yoledas, but any carbon that she's chayav for, like a chatas or an asham. Okay, but anything like that. Why is he required? Shekach kosevla. This is what he writes. If you look at the ksuba, the minig was achrayis dislach alai min kadavasnan. Any obligation that you have on me, or dislach alai, that you can come to me that I have obligated to pay you from before. In other words, he said, I will cover all your obligations. That's what he said. Any obligation you have is on me. Achrayis dislach alai. It's on me. From the time that we got married. So since they put that in the lashon b'ksuba, so Rabbi Yehuda said, okay, you know what? Any obligation you have is on me. So it's like I have the obligation. I'm wealthy. I can bring a regular animal. I don't have to bring a poor carbon. So again, Rabbi Yehuda darshan the words that people used in the ksuba to explain to use this halacha. Hillel Hazakin, Vayadorish, Lashon Hadyot. And Rashi points out that let's say they got divorced subsequently, he's not chayav because it's only while the ksuba is in force. If he's paid off for ksuba and she has some requirement, he's not chayav to do it. In other words, this goes according to the lashon of the ksuba. That's how he applied it in general. Hillel Hazakin, another case, Hillel Hazakin Darish Lashon Hadyot. He used Lashon Hadyot in the following case, the Tanya. Interesting case. Anshe Alexandria, the people of Alexandria, Egypt, Hayimakaches and Shasayan. They would do kedusha. Now, today we do kedusha nisuin all at the time of the chuppah, right? The real kedusha, what we call erusin today. We say, oh, did you hear they got engaged? Yankel got engaged to Leah. That's not really erusin. That's simply an agreement. They can break that off very easily with no requirements. You don't need to get. But he says apparently the people of Alexandria, where they would mekadesh their isha, they would mekadesh the women first. Arei Mukadeshes leave it to Basu and give her the ring or give her a piece of paper or give her money, whatever. But when they got married later on, a few months later, some other men would come and grab these women away. Not forcibly, doesn't mean forcibly. You can't force somebody into a marriage, except for Yibum, right? But regular marriage, he has to agree. But it means other people would grab them away from their first fiancés. That's what and the Chacham said, well, listen, if they were engaged or betrothed to the first guy, if a second guy came along and married her, the kid would be a mamzer because it's not she's married to the first guy. You have a child that's born out of wedlock, in wedlock to number one, and number two has bia with her, the kid's a mamzer. Amalai and Hillel Hazakin said, listen, before you declare them all mamzerim, bring me the ksuba that your mother got. Now, normally ksuba today is only at the time of nesuin, but we've learned that you could give a ksuba even at the time of erusin. Bring me the ksuba that your mother got at the time of the erusin. Aviulo, they brought the ksubas of their mother or their mothers in this case. This is what it said. When you get married, when we go into the chuppah, then you should be a wife for me. Meaning, the kedushin was not a kedushin from the time that he actually gave her the ring. They wrote in the ksuba, I'm giving you a kedushin al manas that there's chuppah. Meaning, at the time of the chuppah, then we'll do it, right? So the chuppah, at that point in time, when you go into the chuppah, then you will be my wife. Meaning, he's saying specifically, you're not my married yet. Maybe I'm giving you a ring now, but you're only when you go into the chuppah, you will be for me for a wife. At that point in time only. In other words, you're not even making a deal if I do marry, if I don't marry you. When we go to chuppah, then we're getting engaged, which is what we do today, right? Which is what we do today. At that point, so Hillel Hazakin interpreted the lashon that people put in the ksuba because he said, "Look, what did they write? This wasn't a regular sanctioned ksuba, the boilerplate that you buy at the sofer. They wrote this specifically." When you go into the chuppah, then so you will be for me for a while. There will be kedushin then. So basically, there was no kedushin before. It was simple like we do today in erusin. When he said Anshe Alexander, how you saying they were mekadosh. It doesn't mean literally they were really kedushin before, and only at the time of the chuppah other people would take them away. No, the other people took them away before there was kedushin because the kedushin was only meant to be chal at the time of the chuppah. You don't even have to say like almanas. Manas is like kolomer manas komer me'achshav dami. It's not like at the time of the chuppah you're married to me from now. That's not the case. Well, there was no chuppah, right? Maybe that's what he meant, but he said like shetis l'chuppah. Then having the incident, he didn't even say me'achshav. It's a whole question about we talked about. Do you need a tanai b'nei tanai b'ruben that you need? If you're making a condition, you have to say im, right? You have to say the condition before the maaseh. If you do this, we'll get this, and you have to have a double lashon. If you do this, it will be chal. If you don't do it, won't be chal. But that's only if you lashon of im. But if you say almanas, you don't need that. So almanas could be, I'm giving it to this almanas that you get married. So maybe the kedushin could be chal before, but that's not the issue over here, whether it's chal before or not. If there's no chuppah, there's no kedushin. That's the point. Since there was no chuppah to number one.
After chuppah, there wouldn't be another kedushin?
No, he's saying at the time of the chuppah, when you go to the chuppah, then the kedushin is chal then. Now, mati chalim afrei or chal then doesn't make any difference really. The point is that if there's no chuppah to number one, then there's no kedushin. right? So when man number two came and married this woman before there was a chuppah with number one, there was no kedusha for number one. Pardon?
It was a present.
It was a present, whatever you want to call it, right? Exactly. That's another machlokas, right? We had, is it a gift or it's not? But let's say if a man gives a kedushin to his sister, where kedushin is not chal. Is it a gift or, right? Is it a gift that he's giving it to her? Or, it's not chal and she has to give it back. We had that discussion for it. Okay, another case. These are different cases where the rabbis, based on the common language, determined the halacha. The following. The Tanya Rav Meir Shapiro, Amal Chavero. Let's say you have a malva and a lova, the lender and the debtor, right? The creditor and the debtor gave money to the debtor, and if the debtor couldn't pay, so the creditor goes to the bezdin, and the bezdin sends a messenger, and they take a collateral, they take a pledge from his man's house. They go and they take his blanket or his belt, whatever. But he shouldn't take something that, let's say the loan was $100. He shouldn't take something the value of which was more than $100. Why? This is what they used to write in the shtar, in the IOU. The payment that you have on me, meaning that I'm obligated to pay you, is to the full value of this item. Now, in other words, it's to the full value, meaning that if I don't pay you, you can take this item. If the item is worth $110 and the loan was only $100, and he wrote in it, you could take the full value of this item, going to pay rebit, right? You lent him $100 and he's giving back $110. So he says, so Rav Shapiro said, halacha, that since this is what they write in the shtar, to the full value of this, therefore, you shouldn't take a pledge, collateral of more than the value of the loan, because otherwise the guy's going to take that because he wrote on it. If I don't pay you, you'll take this whole item to its full value. Okay, so that's the halacha. You shouldn't take something that's worth more than the loan. Says the Gemara, though, wait a minute. Time to cost of halacha. It's only because he wrote this. Lo cost of hachi. If he didn't write that in the IOU, lo kanya, then the creditor is not able to take the pledge. If you took a pledge, like Bezin went in and took a pledge from his house, and then he returned it to him, as the halacha is, the man's poor, you took his blanket, you got to give it back to him to use, etc. Let's say he returned to umes, and then the debtor died. While the pledge was in the possession of the debtor, he died. Show them what you could take away from his kids, even though normally you can't take away metalplin from Yisomim, right? If a man owes you money and it was a written shtar and he was mortgaged with land, you can go grab the land. But if it's metalplin, you can't. But here Rabbi Yochanan says, right, mashkano v'heishava mashka, you could take a mace, show it to Malgavavan because it really belongs to the creditor. Remember, it says, if it doesn't belong to you, why is it stuck? If you give it back to the poor debtor to use, it's stuck because it really belongs to you. And Rashi says, the last Rashi on the page, what do you have to write this from? He returned it to him. Given the mashkane, because since the creditor took it as a mashkane, Kanye, he acquired it. It's his. It's like if a man lends something, a man lends a shovel to a poor person to use, and the man dies. It's still the owner's shovel, right? It's not like he's not collecting something from the children that he shouldn't have taken. So the answer is a hanik. So what do you have to write this for anyway? If it's a mashkan, you don't have to write. What do you have to write? You have to write this in the shtar that you'll be able to take anything. You'll collect from this. He puts that into the IOU when they take the mashkan from him. Why? Anyway, he could take it back. The mom could take it back. Writing it down helps in case the item lost its value. Let's say he took an item that's worth $100. The loan was $100, and the peasant went in and he took a mashkin of $100. But now the item has lost its value. Maybe the lover was using it, and it got ruined a little bit, and it depreciated in value. You know what? The malva is entitled to go collect the full value. If it's only worth $80 now, even though normally you can't collect some metalplin movables, here you can collect even the extra 20 from other stuff that they have. Rashi says, the top Rashi on the page, if it got devalued, it's written in the star because that he relies on that and he's able to do that. That's what the writing it felt. Another case, Rabbi Yossi, Hayadorish Lashon Hedyo. He darshened also Lashon Hedyo. In other words, he took common language and used it. Now, if you've ever been at a wedding, so many of you have been at a wedding, and when they read the ksuba, usually they read it, nobody pays any attention to it. They promised him hundreds of thousands of shekels, and everything is written in there. And whatever you add on, who cares? Where's the food? Nobody pays much attention to it. But usually they like to add a lot into it. Now, sometimes there's unfortunately they get divorced, and there's a claim made. Oh, you made all these claims. Now, what does the husband have to pay? He has to pay everything that he promised, and also, if the father-in-law, if the husband's father-in-law, the father of the kala, sometimes gives a dowry, right? And they write that in there too. I'm giving $100,000. Marriage. I want them to have a nice life and them to have money. However, they put that in the ksuba too. So if his daughter is widowed or divorced, she's entitled to everything that the husband promised, whatever besides the other obligations in the ksuba about supporting her, etc., etc. He promised all this money, including the money that the father-in-law, put in there too. Now, sometimes the father-in-law exaggerates also just to make it go, ooh, look, he gave $100,000, he gave $1 million, look at all that. Is that to be taken seriously or not? Now, if he writes it in the ksuba, the father-in-law says, I'm $100,000, put it in there, and you'll get it from me, and then of course if something happens to you or you divorce her, you got to give her back that money. Okay, but is that literal or not? So here's what happened. Rabbi Yossi, take the top line of the page. Rabbi Yossi, the time Rabbi Yossi, if the minhag goes that they made the ksuba literally like a loan, whatever you wrote in there, if I write an IOU that I lent you $1,000, you got to make $1,000. You can't say I was exaggerating. You wrote it literally milva. Then go from me, you can collect the whole thing. Collecting the whole thing here means also not only that she will get that eventually, but that the husband could say, the father-in-law said, listen, everybody, he's given $100,000. Oh, very nice. The father-in-law is giving $100,000. We write that in there. Then when they get married, the husband says, okay, where's the $100,000? I'm entitled to it.
That's if he's still out of work or he's still
the father-in-law, that's why the father-in-law gave that money. They say, can the husband demand the money? So he says, if the minhag is literally like a loan, government can collect it like a loan. Let's say, though, if minhag was they would just double it. When he said $100,000, he doesn't really mean $100,000. He means $50,000. All you can get is $50,000. Double it. So Gova Machzi can only collect half. Meaning the husband now, after the father-in-law wrote, I'm giving $100,000, that's what they write. The minhag is you double it, make it look nice, they're generous over here. But the husband can only get $50,000. And that's really all he'll owe at the end also when she's widowed or divorced. Now, Harbalai Gavatilsa, the people from that place, the Harbal, they would only collect a third. They would say that when the father-in-law made his announcement how much he's giving, he actually trebled what he was really going to give. So if he wrote $100,000, all the husband could take now is $33,000. That's all he would owe at the end of the marriage. Meramer says no, he collected also the full amount. Not only the amount that the guy meant to give, but you wrote $100,000, he collected the whole amount. I have a Tanya, we learned in a brisa, that if the minhag is you double it, that he gives a larger amount, you can only collect half because the minhag is you double whatever the real pledge, right? It's low kasha. It's not a kasha. If you made a kinyan in it. In other words, it's one thing, if you made a kinyan, you said $100,000, you made a kinyan, you made a symbolic action to show that you meant it, that shows you meant it seriously. So if you made a kinyan in it, $100,000, you want to shake on that and make a chalipa and do some sort of a kinyan there. They break the plate, whatever that is, they hand the plate over, whatever they do. If you made a kinyan, then it's serious. So Ravina Mashbach, so Ravina himself gave extra. He said, okay, $100,000. It's a lot of money. Well, maybe in America today, $100,000 isn't so much, but in my day, $100,000 would have been a lot of money, right? So Ravina Mashbach, he said, I'm giving $100,000. The customer of bar saying he wrote it, to his daughter, he's giving $100,000 into the dowry. Amrulay, Niklame. So the groom's family said, can we make a kinyan on that? Make sure that it's solid. Amrulay, Nikni Mene Demar, can we make a kinyan on it? Amrulay, listen, if you want a kinyan, it's not going to be doubled. If I'm doubling it, no kinyan. In other words, he didn't want to make a kinyan. Ravina said, Meramer had done it, taken it seriously, and he said, okay, you made a kinyan. So when Ravina gave a lot of money, said 100,000 to his daughter, they said, let's make a kinyan. He said, well, if you want a kinyan, then I'm not going to double it. And if you want a kinyan, I'll say 50,000. I'm not going to say 100,000, which is doubled. I know what they wrote in the star was double the amount that was actually collected. A man on his deathbed, a man was dying, and he told his sons who were going to inherit his money, he told them, give her 400 for my daughter. My daughter's getting married now. The man was dying, and he told his Yorshim over there, by the way, give her 400 for the ksuba. Now, what does that mean? The question was 400 actual, meaning right in the ksuba, how much? 800, because they always double it, make it look nice, right? Or did he mean right in the ksuba 400, giving her only 200, right? So that was the question. They had this question. Shalach Ravacha Reider Ravavi Lekamed Ravashi asked him this question. Rav Meir, did he mean 400 dinum Timnei that you really write 800 in the ksuba? Because he meant to give her 400, but really write. So the minhag was that they double the amount. The amount that he's going to give, they doubled when they wrote it in the star. Rav Meir Zuzi, or did he actually mean to write 400 in the star, in the ksuba, dinum masam, which is really 200? Amar Rashi. So Rashi says, well, let's look at it. Let's analyze it. Chazina. If he said, if he said, give her 400 zuzi, then indeed, then he meant 800. He said, give her 800, give her 400, means literally give her the 400. So you write Mishtar 800. If he wrote, write 400 in the star, then he meant only 200, right? That was the Inan Mustard. That's it. So did he say, give her 400, or did he say, write 400? He said, give her 400, write 800. If he said, write 400, then you give her 200. Some say that Rav Ashi explained it this way. Chazina, we look at it this way. Right? If he said 400 for the ksuba, then the ksuba, then Avmi Azuzi Din Timime meant for the ksuba. And for the ksuba, give her 400. That means that you write 800 in the ksuba. Big subasa. If he said in the ksuba, in the ksuba, write 400, then it's Arba Zuzay, Din and Muslim, which is only 200. Below, that's what they said Rav Ashi wanted to say, but the Gemara Paskins below, that's not the case. Lotion Dama Liksubasa, Lotion Dama Big Subasa, you think people are that careful. Doesn't make any difference if he said Liksubasa or Big Subasa. Arba Mea Zuzi, the In and Masan. It's always, if he said 400, that means what you're right. That's the assumption that the Yivik Suba form, which is really only 200. Ad da Amar, until he says Avula Stama. If he says give her 400, then he meant to give her 400. If he mentioned the ksuba at all, he meant 400. That's what you're writing the ksuba. You only actually give her 200. Okay. Ahu Gavra. So again, looking at the lashon that people use, again, this is not also an idea lashon hegel, that look at how the people write it. That even though people say 100,000, they only mean 50,000, only 33,000 normally. Ahu Gavra the Kabbalah Mechavre. A man said, listen. What did our Mishnah say? Mishnah said that if a person took a field as a sharecropper, he leased the field as a sharecropper, and he let it go bad, he neglected it, he didn't take care of it, he has to pay the full amount that it would have produced anyway. If the deal was, let's say, 50-50, he's got to pay the owner 50 of what it could have produced. Why? Because that's how he started, because he writes in it, if I let it go fallow, I will make it up. I will make it good. Now here a man said, Omar, he said, if I let it go fail, the owner said, how do I know you're going to take care of my field? He says, if I let it go bad, I'll give you $1,000. I can give him a large amount of money, I guarantee it. Okay, over Hitaka let it go bad. Tilsa, not the whole field. Over Tilsa, he only let a third of it go bad. He worked 2/3 of the field, the third he let it go bad. I mean, they wanted to say, Dinu diovle plus mea plus vitilsa. The halacha is, since he let a third of it go bad, he should give a third of the $1,000 that he made up. Right? He said, the 2/3 that he worked, okay, whatever it produced, he gave him his share. But the third that he didn't work, he should pay the exorbitant amount that he had promised. He promised $1,000 for the whole field if he let it go fallow. He let a third of it go fallow, so he should give him 333 1/3, right? That's how much he should pay. That's what they wanted to say in our dog. Rava says no. Asmachti is an assurance that you don't really expect to lose. It's like the reason why we say that if you make bets and things like that, it's not really foul. Because he just said, oh, if I let it go bad, I'll give you $1,000. Like it was an extremely large amount. And so you say, well, if a third went bad, he should give him a third of that. No, it says he wasn't serious about it. He didn't really mean it. Asmach lo kanyo. Rava, but according to Rava House, it's different in our Mishnah. We learn in our Mishnah, if I let it go bad, I will pay out of the best of the field. I will give you the best. I will make good on it. So here also, this is Hassam Lokagosam. There he didn't exaggerate. He just said, if I let it go fallow, I will pay you as if the field produced, I'll make up for it and I'll pay whatever the field would have normally produced, which but over here this was considered an exaggeration because he didn't really mean to say, just meant to convince him, I'll take care of the field. And if I don't take care of it, I'll give you $1,000, which is a lot of money. Like I'll give you $1 million. He didn't mean it seriously. Keeping the Kamar Milsi since he said some large amount, Guzman Bialma is simply an exaggeration to Kagazim, and he wasn't serious and he doesn't have to pay that amount. He would have to pay presumably the amount, a percentage of the field would have normally produced. Ahu Gavra, another story. Now, a story Ahu Gavra, the couple Ara Lisham Shmi, he had leased a field that was normally produced sesame, and sesame deteriorates the field a lot. When you grow sesame there, it takes a lot of the nutrients out of the field, and it depreciates the land. The land needs to rest and get reinvigorated and refurbished to produce well. But so this man accepted the deal. He took a lease to produce sesame, again, presumably on a percentage basis. Right? Zorachit, instead, he planted wheat, which is less detrimental to the land. Right? Of the chiti kashim. Now, wheat is worth less, but in this case, the wheat, he had good mazel, and the wheat produced as much money and return as much as the sesame, even though the sesame is more expensive and deteriorates the field more. But here he produced wheat, and the wheat did as much as the shumsmi. Rashi says that it's and the value, the price of wheat went up, and he didn't cause the balabais any loss by producing wheat instead of sesame, which is worth more normally, but over here the wheat was worth as much, and the balabais had the advantage that his field wasn't used up. Sabra of Kana Lameim Rav Kana felt to say, Menakle Kashiara, listen, you know what? Your land has been less deteriorated because I used wheat, and therefore I should give you less of a percentage. Let's say the deal was 50-50, right? So I would give you 50% of the profits of the wheat, which is now equal to the sesame. But you know what? I've done you a favor because now your field has not been deteriorated as much as if I done sesame. So I should get a little bit more than that. I can deduct for that. Amrle Ravashi Lavkana, so Ravashi retorted to Rav Kana, no. I mean, should people say, Kach Sha'ara, V'lo Kach Lashmara. Let the field get ruined and don't ruin the man. In other words, he's entitled to half his profits. He's entitled, the sharecropper was supposed to give him, let's say, half the profits. He's got to get them. He'd been better off deteriorating the land, depreciating the land by producing sesame rather than you produce wheat. So the land didn't get deteriorated as much. Now you want to take away money from the owner. The man would rather have his field deteriorated than have him deteriorate by not having money. Don't impoverish the man. So Ravashi tells Rav Kana, therefore you can't deduct anything. In other words, he's just got an advantage that he got the same return for his money. He got 50% of the produce. The produce here was wheat, which was worth as much as the sesame at the end of the day, and his field didn't get diminished as much as it would have been had he produced the sesame.
This is assuming he really didn't want the sesame.
But presumably they sold it, and it was the value. Yeah. Correct. Yeah. Right. Then he could have said you're right. Then he could have sued him, But since it was worth the same thing, he could have traded the wheat for sesame. However, the Kabbalah Ara Lisham should be a similar case. A man had leased a field to produce sesame, right? So the same thing, he produced wheat. And in this case, it wasn't just that the wheat went up in value and deteriorated the field less, but rather of the chit, it's famous from me. The had mazel that the wheat was worth more than the sesame. Now the owner had said, produce sesame and give me half of it, whatever it was, let's say 50-50. And here the wheat produced more. So the extra amount, let's say he had to produce sesame, they would have made $500. Now that he produced wheat, it was worth $600. So why should the owner? It was because of the work of the lessee, right, who did the extra work. So instead of giving the owner, let's say $250 a piece, or $500 was what the sesame would have produced, the wheat produced, let's say, a profit of $600. So should they split and each get $300, or do you say no? The difference, the owner's only going to get his $250 if it would produce sesame. The fact that he produced wheat and the wheat was worth more, that extra $100 should go entirely to the lessee. So he told Ravina, that's what you want to say? You want to say that the owner should not share in the extra amount that the wheat produced over and above the sesame? Do you think only the lessee improved it and got more value and the land didn't? What produced the wheat? It was the field of the owner. So the owner's field also contributed to the profits over here, and therefore they should split it equally. Amrin Ardah. Now this is the case we had in Ravas. We had in other cases also. Amrin Ardah. Hi Iska. Unfortunately, we know what an Iska is, right? Iska that they talk about is the deal, unfortunately, for our the brothers and sisters, right? But Iska means a deal. So what did a deal mean in those days in the Gemara? A deal meant this. You have an owner who has merchandise, and the merchandise is worth a small amount when we're here in Illinois. But if you take it to the big city in New York, you're going to get a lot more money. So the owner gives it to, let's say, we'll call him the contractor. Let's call him the contractor. The owner gives the contractor the produce, and he says, listen, you take it there and sell it at the higher value, and you're half responsible for it, and half not. Half is I'm taking the risk, and half is your risk, meaning half of it is effectively a loan, because if you lose the whole thing, you got to pay it back. So let's say it's worth $100, right? It's $100 worth $100, so you're going to sell it over there, right? So $50 of it, the produce, you're responsible for it. That means you're borrowing that $50. You're responsible for it. 50% is I'm responsible for it. Now we're going to share the profits. Right? We're going to share the profits. So the rabbi said, you understand the case again. We're going to take it there. You're going to sell. You're going to take this stuff that's worth $100. You're going to sell it there for, let's say, for $150, and there's a $50 profit, and we're going to split it 50-50, right? But you're responsible for half, and I'm responsible for half. So is that rebit? Think about it. Is it rebit? In the way it is, because the contractor is now working for me. He's acting as my agent, selling this stuff for me, right? Half the profit mine. In return for the loan, I'm giving him a loan of 50% of it, right? Half of it is a loan he is responsible for. But he's got to do something for that loan. What does he have to do? Work mine. He's got to sell my share also. Since that looks like rebid, the rabbi said, listen, you know what you have to do there? If there's a loss, if he loses the whole thing, we share it equally, right? Half is your loss, half is my loss. If you took it, you're responsible for half is my loss. But if there's a gain, we're not going to split it. The extra $50 that the profit that we're going to get, we're not going to make it here. Let's take a simple case. Let's say the profit's $60. You're going to sell it there for $160, so the numbers are rounded. I give you merchandise for $100. You're going to take it to New York and sell it for $160. Now, what's the normal deal? Again, you're responsible if I'm responsible. If you lost the whole thing, let's say you lost the whole thing on the road or whatever the whole thing's lost, we're going to share that equally. Half is my loss, I'm going to eat that, and half you got to pay me back. If there's a gain, let's say you make $60 on it, instead of splitting it $30 a piece, we're going to say, no, you know what? The owner is only going to get a third. He's only going to get $20, and the contractor is going to get $40. Why? Because this way the contractors make money so that it's not rebid. If the contractor is working totally for me, he's selling my stuff there. We're going to split the profits, but he's selling my half. He's working for me, and he's working for me because I gave him a loan of half. So since I lent him half is a loan to him. And if he's working for me and not gaining anything by it, other than half is a loan. So he's going to sell his half, right? He's going to sell his half for a profit. That's his thing, and he owes me the regular amount, right? The amount that half of the merchandise, half the cost of the merchandise. In return for him working for me, though, I've given him this loan. If I give him a loan and he's giving me back more than the loan, why? What is he giving me back more? He's working for me. He's selling my half. That looks like forbidden. Therefore, the rabbi said that the profits are not split equally. The profits, the contractor gets more, he gets 2/3, and I get 1/3. Therefore, he's being paid for his work. The loan is a loan. 50% is a loan. That's a loan. He owes me his loan. He can work with that. He owes me back the cost, right? But when he comes to the profits, he's going to get more of the profits than me. Why? Because that extra amount that he's going to get, it's like a 6 more. Instead of 50-50, we're going to split it 2/3 and 1/3. Now he gets a 6 more than the half. So in return, he's getting extra amount. So that extra amount that he's getting is what I'm paying him to sell my half. I'm paying him to sell my. If I don't pay him to sell my half, he's selling my half. He's doing work for me for free, right? In return for what? Because I've given him a loan. So that doesn't look good. So therefore, this kind of an iska, when I send the contractor to take the merchandise and sell it in New York for the higher amount, make the profit. So the deal is, if you look at it carefully, it's half a loan because he's responsible for half. That means I'm lending him half. Half he's not a loan, half is my responsibility. And we share in the loss. But if there's a gain, he gets more. Because if he doesn't get more, if we split it 50-50 or 30-30 and $30 and $30, if the gain was $60, if we split it evenly, then he did my work for me. And what did I pay him for? I didn't pay him for anything. It's what did he get? He did work for me simply because I gave him a loan. Therefore, that's not good. Therefore, that's the rule. So high iska, back to the high iska, half is a loan and half is a pikadon. He's guarding it for me. And he's like a shamarchinim. So if there's a loss, he's not responsible. Avrabana Mills, so the rabbis made it this kind of a deal. The nechelov and nechelov, it's good for the lov and good for the malva, right? The lova gets something out of it because he gets to borrow the money and make money for it there, and the malva gets something out of it too. But they did it in this form, and they said that the malva gets less of a share of the profits than the lova. Now, wait, if it's half it's a loan, maybe the contractor could say, "Boy, you know what?" The Gemara wanted to say, if it half it's a loan, I could do whatever I want with it as long as I'm responsible to pay it back. I could do what I want. Rabbi, no. That's why they call it iska. When I give it to you, I gave it to you to work with it. And as I gave it to you, we're partners. You got to go to New York and sell it. You can't say, well, half is mine. You're gonna blow it all on fun and games, etc. You can't do that. Not to drink your beer with it. You can't just spend it spend it as everyone. I'm gonna read about Rav in Mace. Again, if he died, let's say the contractor died. Is it like metalton because it's like a loan that you can't pay back, that you can't accept metalton from the children? In other words, it wasn't karka because it's like a loan and you can't collect. If the man dies, if the debtor dies, you can't collect. If it's metalton, you can't collect from his children. Rabbi says no. That's why it's called niska. If he dies, it's not metalton like sobana, but rather you're not entitled to do whatever you want. I sent you to New York with this merchandise. You're supposed to work on the merchandise. You can't say, "Oh, half of it's yours as a loan, and you can do whatever you want with it." No, it's a deal that normally you can't collect metalton from your son because you didn't expect to collect it from there. You weren't somich on that, and they spent metalton. They're allowed to spend the money in their house if it's metalton. But here, you meant to say, "No, you can't do whatever you want with it. You're acting on my behalf together with your behalf." Rabbi goes on to say, "Chadiska." That what you should do is, and this is really like tomorrow's Gemara is going to pick it up from here. He says that what you should do is that you should make, if it's one deal, you should make one contract. If it's two deals, make two contracts. Because if you make it two separate contracts, see, he says, let's say it's one deal and you make two shars out of it. So if let's say there were two garments and you gave two garments to sell, and on one there was a loss of $5, and the other one there was a gain of $15. So if you look at it as one big iska, so then what was the net effect? You lost $5 on one coat and made $15 on another. So you made $10. The owner takes a third, right, of the profit. He gets $3 1/3, and the contractor gets 2 1/3. That's if you make it as one big deal. right? But if you made it into two separate deals, so then the owner lost the $5 loss was split evenly. They each lost 2.5, and the $15 gain, the owner only took $5 out of that. So he gained $5 on one, lost 2.5 on the other. He only winds up with 2.5. So that's a loss for the Malva. And the reverse is a loss for the Lova. That'll be on tomorrow's Gemara. Tomorrow's Gemara will be on the podcast. And on Sunday, not Sunday, it's Thursday. On Thursday, we're going to pick it up from Kufav on the 4th line. After the word Teiku in the 4th line, that's where the podcast will take you to. We'll pick it up from there on Thursday. And for those in Chutzlaretz, we'll put up the next 2 Dapim, because they have 2 days of Yontif. We'll be on the
Thank you. Have a